Hello everyone, welcome to today's Meet and Eat session with Youth Insearch, and we'll have a bit of a chat about them. But before we start, I'd like to do acknowledgement of country. So to start the session, I'd like to acknowledge and honour the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, including the Guyabal and the Jarrah people from around Toowoomba, where I am at the moment, and we pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. So I'd like to welcome our very, very, very special guest, Tally Fogg. How are you, Tally?
Good, thank you.
Great to have you here. Tally is a practice leader, peer practice leader with Youth Insearch. So Youth Insearch is obviously a charity that we really, really like because they're the only charity that we've actually been given 3 grants in a row to. Youth Insearch do some really special things, I think, in regards to helping at-risk youth. And that includes support groups, weekends away, social workers, and really looked at what I call a location-based model where they put and look after youth in certain regions, and we'll have a chat about that. I got the pleasure of spending a weekend camp, so I went away and did a whole weekend camp at Duckadang out sort of back of Kingaroy, and look, really special experience for me. I'm getting to know, I think there's about 30 kids on that camp, male and female, aged between sort of 14 and 18, and got to look at how, obviously, the Youth Insearch program works, but also how the peer leaders actually take control of that weekend and provide a lot of input. So what we funded for this grant round is peer leader training, so leaders for 3 youth on the Darling Downs, Wide Bay, Burnett. And that covers a whole range of training and leadership, etc., to allow them to actually be able to facilitate a lot of the stuff. So facilitate some of the support groups, facilitate some of the key sessions in these weekends away. And I was just so impressed with these young people because they've actually had that lived experience. They've gone through what the other kids in the camp had gone through, and to different degrees, obviously, but were able to really step up and provide a level of support I thought was pretty special. So I'll get Tally obviously to speak about that a lot more. So they've got our $15,000 grant and obviously to look after that peer training. So tell us about yourself, Tally.
Yeah, so I'm Tally. So I live in the Logan area, but I grew up rurally. So I grew up out in Dalby, so only about an hour west of here. I originally started out on the program as one of the participants, actually. Yeah. So when I was 14, I went on my first program, and it was a bit of a different experience for me. It was quite different to what I was used to. I came from like a very heavy domestic violence background. There was a lot of drugs and alcohol. I came from like a life where it was prevalent of crime, things along those lines. So when I came along to this weekend workshop, and there were these people that were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to talk about our feelings, and we're going to get to the bottom." I was like, "Oh, okay, we don't do that. Like, no, that's a bit foreign territory for me, you know." So yeah, it was definitely a bit of an eye opener. But not only that, I think for me the biggest key point was recognising that the life that I was used to and the life that I was living was not normal, you know, and it wasn't exactly the everyday life of what people experienced. And so, you know, like I think for me, like that was a bit of like a stepping stone and a bit of like a key point in like there are parts of my life that probably need to change, you know, and so a lot like all of the other kids that had come on the program and stuff like that, I committed to the journey. It was a bit of a process, you know. I went through a lot of different stepping stones along the way. Like I was one of those kids that was always in trouble at school, like spending a lot of time like either on suspensions or in detention, or you know, like getting in trouble with the police and you know just doing the wrong thing essentially. Like yes. I was one of those at-risk youth, like. You know, so I was quite well known by a lot of the police in town, and wasn't exactly the best road that I was headed down. You know, and then once I got involved with the program, I recognised that I had a choice. You know, so I'm a child of 8, and like a lot of my older siblings before me had followed the same path, but I realised that you know if I wanted to show my younger siblings that they also had a choice, that I had to lead the example of that behaviour. And so I guess for me, that was the biggest driving point in wanting to do leadership and wanting to go through the process of being able to help other young people as well, so that I could also role model that in my life and in my family. I think probably 3 years it took me to really get on the right track.
Okay.
You know, so I'd attended about 5 programs as a participant, and then I decided in 2013 that I was ready to go through the leadership journey. So I applied, I went through the process, I'd been clean from, you know, drugs and alcohol, I'd made sure that, like, I was actually at a point where I graduated high school by that point, so I didn't think I'd make it that far, but I did.
Well done.
You know, and yeah, it was just being a positive role model in my community. So I was attending my support groups that were run weekly. I was making sure that, like, I was being a good example for the community and things along those lines. And then, yeah, going through leadership, I recognised that there was so much more to it than what I initially thought, you know. Like, to start with, when I did leadership, I thought that it was about giving back what was given to me, you know, and, like, that was the whole basis of why I wanted to become a leader, was that I wanted to give back all of those opportunities that were given to me as a young person. But then the more that I did it, the more I realised that this is so much more than that, you know. Like, for me, the greatest point in what I do as a leader in the journey is not only the opportunities that I've been given in that and the skills that I've been given that I've, you know, taken on, and it's helped me to progress into a career and things like that. But it's more about, like, the young people that you meet and the difference between a Friday night and a Sunday afternoon. You go from seeing somebody that might be so lost and so vulnerable and so scared, and then you just see, like, a slight glimmer of hope in their eyes by the end of the that Sunday afternoon, and it's like, wow, that's life changing. You know?
Absolutely. So, just to give you some context, one thing I really love about Youth Insearch is, even from the CEO, so many people that work there and participate have gone through the program as a youth. So, so to me, lived experience in this space is just critical. So
absolutely,
to be able to have the empathy of, I sort of understand what you're going through. I've sat in your shoes, and that gives you such, I think, a credibility with the kids. To, you know, and like you said, there's so much to their program that you don't know about. So, you know, once I got to talking to the youth leaders on the program, the people that we're helping fund, and looking at the depth of the training that they go through, it gives you confidence that, okay, when a situation arises at a support group or a weekend away, you know, they're not thrown in the deep end. And they've got the ability to handle it. But also, sitting on the side, Youth Insearch staff to help help control a situation if needed.
I think it's more about guidance than anything else.
That's a great, perfect word.
And I mean, that's probably, like, you know, more to do with my role now. And so as a peer practice lead, I oversee the support of all of our lived experience peer workers and any training that they might need, as well as helping with like the leaders training and development for each one of our new leaders that are coming through the process. So, you know, like, all of that sort of stuff is where, like, a lot of my time and my energy goes in my role, and basically it's just making sure that, like, we're giving them all of the skills that they need. So we're doing open dialogue training so that they know how to navigate these conversations on a weekend workshop in a trauma-informed way. They know how to do it safely. They know how to do it so that, you know, like, they don't fall down the rabbit hole and they're not in a place where they don't know how to handle that, or, you know, like, even the emotions that might arise. We teach them about conflict resolution and, you know, like, all of those different things, as well as, like, the basic facilitation skills on how to stand up in a room full of 40 kids and how to deliver a session, you know?
No, it's pretty amazing. And look, some of the conversations that I was privy to, like, they're not your average conversation, are they? No, it goes deep, and it goes to, you know, some very dark places, and, you know, to see a 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old helping a 14-year-old, I thought was really special. So a bit of a background story on Youth Insearch. It's not a new
Absolutely
charity,
not. Absolutely not. So we've been operating for about 38 years. It'll be 38 years September, I believe. So in that time, we've had about 35,000 young people that have come through the program. Of that, about 300 have gone on to do leadership. You know, so it is quite a small cohort in terms of, like, the amount of people that do come through the program. You know, we've been running across Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales for the last... so we started off down in New South Wales, so they've been where it's been running the most, and then it's sort of, like, branched up and down a little bit further in the last 20, 25 years. But yeah, we started off in Riverstone is actually where we started. It's a town in New South Wales. It was a very, very high crime population. There was a counsellor that was working in the schools and sort of realised that one-on-one work that he was trying to do with the kids that he was working with wasn't working. So he sort of got them all together and he said, well, what do you want, And they all come together and they said, well, we'd like to go away for a weekend. We'd like to disconnect from everything that's happening at home, and we want to just focus on the stuff that's happening in our lives, and we want to talk about it.
Super important. So, if we look at what we're funding the leadership training for the three sort of peer support people.
Yep.
So give us a bit of a deeper dive into that. If that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when it comes to our leadership program, we run over 3 stages. So we just finished our stage 1, which was 3 days of virtual online. We ran through some, I guess, like the first stage is sort of like getting to know each other, getting to know themselves a little bit. So it's a little bit of that self-development stuff. We ran through like some of the program history. They came up with their leaders' statements on what does being a leader mean to you, and all of those different things. We went through some conflict resolution skills, just sort of like low level. And then we also did a lot around like communication and like what are the different levels of communication and how do you talk to one another, how do you talk to young people. And then we're actually getting together next month for our first face-to-face. So we do 3 stages. So we'll do our face-to-face, which is run over 5 days in person, and that's where like we'll do a real deep dive into like a lot of the things that we cover. So there'll be some open dialogue training as well before then. So it'll be a 2-day course of open dialogue training that's in about 2 weeks' time. And then we go on to the face-to-face stage where we'll run through some more of that conflict resolution. We'll go through different ways that you might navigate a conversation. We'll go through all of the different sessions. We'll break them all down. We talk about all the different things that might come up in a session, how to navigate those conversations.
Are you comfortable naming a few sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for the youth leaders, they would typically run sessions that are on self-esteem. You'll run it on communication. You run it on trust, and then the other one is a teen scene session. So teen scene is where we might talk about any sort of topic from bullying right through to self-harm, suicidal ideations. You might talk about gender identity issues. You might talk about different things, whatever's most prevalent to what's happening in the room at the time. So typically what would happen is you would have a youth leader that runs those sessions, and in the lead up to the weekend workshop, they might look at like the people that are coming and they'll go, okay, of these young people that I know, this is the most relevant topic. So I'm going to run a session on this, and this is what I'm going to do. So we run through like all the different presentation skills that they can do, so making sure that they know how to actually deliver a session for one, so how to run an activity, how to be able to introduce your topic, how to be able to ask the questions on like what's going to open up the room. We talk about how to utilise music and how music opens up emotions and, how to be able to do that in a safe way and navigate that, And then, when it comes to the adult leaders, is where we might run through a little bit of the like the hassles facilitation. So that's where the open dialogue piece comes into play, and it's really, really valuable key. So the hassle sessions that we run, they would be around sexual assault. They'll be around parent-adolescent relationships, drug and alcohol misuse, or like the effects of drug and alcohol in your life, as well as grief and loss. So,
some pretty heavy topics.
Yeah, absolutely.
But much needed topics for that.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is like we tend to talk about the real taboo subjects where people don't get the opportunity to talk about that unless it's in a one-on-one closed-off room sort of space environment,
Definitely on that weekend I jumped straight in and got into it nice and early, which I think was great and what was needed and what the kids really responded to. How at-risk youth yourself, how did you find out about Youth Insearch?
So we have a lot of different referral systems. So with the place-based model, we're typically we co-locate. We don't have bricks and mortar. So we co-locate, we go into a community and we say, hey, this is what we have to offer. Where would you best place us? Where do you need us? What can we give to you? So a lot of the referrals do come from where we might be co-located. So it might come from schools, it might come from, like juvenile justice, it might come from child safety, it might come from a lot of different places. So for me, it was there was a youth worker that was working out of the school, and that was sort of how it was all started back then. Back then we ran on the volunteer model as well. So a lot of our volunteer support adults might come from the community services sector. And so, there was a lot of really relevant referral points from that. But we've had, a lot of referrals that have also come from directly from the court systems, where we've had kids that are like on the verge of going to juvie, and they're like, well, we'll try this out, and if this doesn't work, then
it's just last chance.
100%.
So I know when we first started, we funded something up in Bundaberg, the support groups in Bundaberg. So you're co-located out of the Headspace building up there, which was great. You know, a lot of media about at-risk youth and youth crime and etc. Any sort of thoughts on that? Is it spiralling out of control? Are they?
I think people focus on the actions rather than the why. You know, and I think that the more that people take a step back and recognise that young people don't just act up. Young people don't just choose to wake up one day and steal a car or break into a place, or, you know, even when you look at like the level of self-harm and suicide in young people today, like young people don't just wake up one day and decide that like they're going to take their lives. Like, so, you know, when it comes to that, I think that the more we put time and effort into what we do, you know, for example, us as an organisation, I know that the more time and effort that we put in and the more that we can spread our message of, you know, like, how do we get there before it gets to that point?
Yes.
Early intervention is like the biggest key in any sort of like at-risk youth. Like, when you look at the trauma that impacts these young people's lives, and you look at why they do what they do, and you problem solve, and you work with them, and you say, hey, you know, like, we're going to walk down this road with you, and we're in this together, and you just show them the way. Like, a lot of the time, they just need someone in their corner. They need someone to believe in them, and they've never had that before, and that's why they fall into like the gang mentalities and the street violence.
Yeah. And look, I think that's a really important point that I picked up at the camp, was that just that connectiveness of the group. So, you know, connection is such an important thing, and to see these kids connect and become, you know, a quasi-family to each other. And another thing that, you know, once you've had trauma, and these kids have had some serious trauma, like, how can you expect them to act normally after that? Because it's not a normal situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
You know, you need to be tough. You need to, well, hang on a minute, they've gone through trauma that I have no idea about. And how can we expect these kids to act normally post that? You know, I just don't know. But you're right, early intervention, 100% is the key. Most rewarding part about your role?
I think the most rewarding part of what I do is seeing the flow-on effect, you know. So I went through the program, and then I became a support adult as soon as I could. As soon as I turned 18, I was like, all right, I'm going to start bringing kids on camp. We're going to change the world, you know. And there's like one young kid that I think has impacted my life the most. She was a young kid that was always in trouble with the cops. She was at risk of going to juvie, heavy on the drugs, all that sort of stuff, you know. And so I took her on a program, and then I mentored her, and like, you know, I was a prevalent part of her support and watching her grow and learn as a person, you know. And now she's one of our lived experience peer workers that's living up in Bundaberg, and she's having that same effect on, you know, like, she's got a caseload of like 30 kids at the moment that she's working with, and she's helping along the same lines for the same issues, you know. And it's like that flow-on effect of just seeing like what one person can do. You know?
And it is a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and we look at that with our funding, and we looked, you know, generally we fund probably programs that affect a larger amount of people. So this was, you know, training for 3 people.
Yep.
But then we looked at, as a committee, that's like, you know, what impact will those 3 people have on, you know, their peers and other things.
Absolutely.
And I think the stats are from Youth Insearch, average of 5 to 6 years of being a peer leader once you've gone through the program. So it's not just a 1 year, do it, get out. People are in there.
There is definitely longevity in leadership. You know? A lot of the youth leaders that come through the program are typically there right through until they hit the stage of adult leader, you know. So I know I started my leadership journey when I was 17. I'm now 27 this year, you know, so I'm coming up on 10 years where I'm being a leader, you know.
It was a long time. You had a magic wand. Someone gave you a big bucket of money. How do we sort of, what would you do first to help with this at-risk youth?
I think that my first step would probably be more implementation around our lived experience peer workforce that we've created. So right now we're running on a pilot. We have 7 lived experience peer workers, and like our goal is to get in every LGA across Australia. So the goal is to have 1 social worker 2 lived experience peer workers, and so right now that model is running in 4 different areas. So we're running across the Shoalhaven, out in Gunnedah in New South Wales, down in Gippsland, Rosedale in Victoria, and then up in the Bundaberg Gladstone area. So, for me, like, seeing the effects that has when you have 1 social worker, you have 2 peer workers, you have them out in the community, it's peer-led, it's young people that are their age that are now in a position where they can show them that, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel, I think that absolutely I would put more time and more effort and more money into that, right. And, I'd watch it grow.
You've got my back. I haven't got 5 minutes.
I know.
But I think it's
if
great.
Only, if only,
I've said it a few times, I can't say enough how much I think that peer support makes a massive difference, and there's a big difference in your program compared to some other programs. So before we finish up, we might throw it over to any of the listeners, our loyal listeners, if they have any questions.
Mm-hmm. I have one.
Go for it.
Is this a program, like, would the police be able to come to you with young people that are actually out of control and get help from you? Like, can they work with you somehow to help these young people? Like you said, we've got crime increasing every day with young people. This is a program that maybe the police need to come on board with and, get these young kids in there to help them rather than, them constantly doing the wrong thing.
Yeah,
is there a way that can happen?
We actually already do that. So we work with police stations across a lot of different areas that we work out of. Here in Queensland in particular, the police liaison is one of our referral sources out in Dalby. We're linked in with the police station out at Laidley. Up in Bundaberg we do get some referrals from youth justice, areas like that. But, a lot of what our peer workers are able to do is actually advocacy work. So that's like a main part of what they do. So, it's definitely been the case where we've had the police give us a call and say, hey, look, I've got this young person. We've had a couple of the sergeants that have tried to get through to them. We're not getting anywhere. Are you guys able to come down, have a bit of a chat? We can look through, whether or not your program's the right one for them. And, it's definitely shown a lot of success before in the past when we've done that.
Great question. But before we finish up, I always would like to finish with this question. We're about to go back to our desks, busy day. What are some key things you want us to remember about Youth in Search, or key things even just to think about that sort of at-risk youth situation in Australia?
I think probably the most valuable thing that I've learnt over the years is that young people are best placed to support young people. Mm-hmm. If you really, really want to be able to connect the dots and help these young people to be able to get the help that they need, put them amongst the role models in their peers and, watch the magic happen. Yeah. That's the magic in what works and with our organisation and why it's worked for the last 35 years, Yeah.
Right. It's, I think, I've banged on about it enough. I've seen it in action and, to see these peers, leaders grow into people that can stand in front of a room, control some really difficult conversations. And just an example, when I was in the room, first started, there was people willing to put their hand up, wanting to talk, wanting to tell their story, yet there was people sitting with a hoodie pretty much over their head, just listening. And you could see by the end of, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday afternoon, the hoodie had come off by Sunday afternoon and there was a bit more engagement there. And I'm sure that's mainly because they felt comfortable because they're talking to a peer, not so much an adult talking down. So really good. Telly, you've been amazing. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Just understanding more about Youth in Search. Like I said, one of our favourite charities, even though I'm not allowed to say that, but they do a great job. And we really appreciate everything that you do and being very open and honest about your story. We really appreciate that.
No troubles. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Have a great day, people. Enjoy the rest of Thursday.